I'm kind of glad that I archive, well, not necessarily archive, but on a nightly basis, I record various news shows that are on primarily MSNBC, Fox News, and CNN. I do that so that I can try to keep up with the thought patterns of the various hosts of these shows. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I cannot tolerate a lot from Sean Hannity. Just can't do it. I can tolerate Megyn Kelly somewhat. And Bill O'Reilly, I barely tolerate him, but it's difficult, because when you listen to someone who basically is pushing what I consider to be racial formats in every opportunity that he gets, and in particular when he gets his facts wrong, I have a problem. Now, everybody has their opinion, and I have mine, you will have yours. But when he pushes a viewpoint that is absolutely in error, and he refuses to debate knowledgeable people on the subjects that he gets wrong, and I'm speaking in particular about the Black Lives Matter movement, in my opinion, he loses all credibility. Now, I know why he does it. He does it because that's what his particular right-leaning audience wants to hear, for the most part. It reinforces their own internal opinions about things. It helps that they want to listen to him spew the things that they believe erroneously, but the things that they believe personally. It's things that are inside of them as well as inside of everyone else. But the problem is when the counter narrative is put out there, all Bill likes to do is just dismiss it. Bill O'Reilly has never really had a sit-down town hall with a person who is familiar with the mantra of the Black Lives Matter movement, the various groups that associate with the Black Lives Matter movement, and he likes to take talking points and make wild, undocumented associations with groups that have been denigrated. All right, I'm going to play the clip from the Bill O'Reilly show last night, and I'll stop it from point in time to point in time to make various comments.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The responsibility that comes with protest, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. If you have been watching Legends and Lives of Patriots, you can see how effective protests against the British were in the American colonies.
One thing about it though, Bill, you seem to have forgotten about the Boston Tea Party and the various other protests that weren't strictly nonviolent. And those were in particular acts of sedition against the authority of the British. But I guess you didn't want to recognize the seeds for the revolution. That's your choice.
In fact, protests led directly to the freedoms we have today. The civil rights marches, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a pacifist, were also very effective in mobilizing public opinion against Jim Crow laws and bias in general. Dr. King got a lot of accomplishments before he was assassinated. Now we have another protest situation in the USA whereby many African Americans believe that law enforcement works actively against them.
If you are a normal white American, the truth is you don't understand being black in America, and you instinctively underestimate the level of discrimination and the level of additional risk.
Yeah, I guess Newt Gingrich is a black African American. Okay.
Mr. Gingrich is essentially correct. Skin color is a very personal situation. Every one of my black friends has felt diminished at times because of their complexions. It's wrong. There's no excuse for it, but it happens in every country. Enter American law enforcement, which is now under siege for allegedly treating black Americans more harshly than white Americans. Talking points.
That's a documented fact, but what do facts have to do with false news?
Does not believe there is a design campaign of prejudice. What is happening here is cause and effect.
Well, Bill, if you don't believe that there's a design campaign against African Americans, you may want to go back and look up the history of the formation of what we now today call police. You may also want to take a look at the Constitution that obviously didn't consider black people fully human, and it took the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments in order to put down on paper what should have been there all along. But I digress.
Because black Americans commit far more crimes proportionally than whites or other ethnic groups, they come into contact with police more often.
That may not necessarily be true, Bill. If you flood a minority area with police and have a very sparse non-minority area patrolled by police, who do you think, or which group do you believe would have more crimes reported? That being said, if we're talking about economics, if you flood a medium to upper class minority area with police, you're not going to find the same level of crime that you would if you flooded a lower to middle class white economic area with police. By definition, the more police you have flooding an area looking for things, the more things they will find. And if they can't find anything, they will create things, which they do. We're talking about phony traffic violations, phony violations as far as jaywalking, crossing the street, the phony violations. And I've seen it, and possibly you have too, but that doesn't mean anything to Bill O'Reilly.
And that contact sometimes turns volatile. However, the key stat in the USA is that less than 2% of all police-civilian interactions result in any kind of physical confrontation. That's extremely low.
Okay, so break that down for me, Bill. Of that 2% of all police interactions, how many of those interactions are with the various groups?
The issue of incarceration, again, deals with crime. The inner city drug.
No, the issue of incarceration deals with arrests. If we're talking about drug usage, it's a documented fact that white people and non-white people, basically, let's say what it is, black people, use drugs basically at the same rate. If that is in fact true, then why are drug arrests for African Americans 3 to 4 times higher than those of white Americans? The answer is enforcement. Police officers tend not to enforce the drug laws when they're dealing with the white community, and tend to over-enforce the drug laws when they're dealing with black community. I've made this statement before and I'll make it again. The university system, and in particular college dormitories, the majority of the college dormitories in this country are, for the most part, white. If you went into any college dormitory, and I do mean any, other than, and even then I'm gonna preface this, Christian universities, and I believe that even there you might find some usage. But if you go into a Harvard or a Princeton or a Michigan State, Ohio State University on a weekend, no uniforms, just walking through the dormitories Friday night, Saturday night, you could make all the drug arrests that you want. But that's not done. Why is that? Because mommy and daddy of the Princeton, Harvard, Ohio State, Michigan State, University of Michigan student will more than likely be a person of means, and probably of substantial means and connections. And for little Johnny to be busted for marijuana use or amphetamine use or heroin use is not going to fly. And that police chief, whoever he is going to be looking to be reelected. And if his guys are putting little Johnny and little Mary in the hoosgow and giving them a criminal record, just how long do you think that the police chief is going to maintain his position? And even though little Johnny and little Mary walk into court, their attorney is going to be one of your better attorneys in the area. The better attorneys have better relationships with the district attorneys, so for the most part, the charges will be pled down to something extremely minor. But let's say even that doesn't work. The judge, after little Johnny and little Mary are convicted, is going to give them more than likely probation because they're good kids, because going to prison will ruin their lives. You've seen that out in California, where the judge gave a rapist caught in the act 6 months. 6 months, of which you'll probably only do 2. And the reason that he only got 6 months was because going to jail would ruin his life. Now let's flip that back around. Let's say the same 18-year-old kid, not in a dormitory, but in his neighborhood, and this is an African American kid. He happens to be strolling down the block. And the police in his predominantly African American neighborhood, lower income, but this kid is smart, and he's got a ride. He's going to college, or he's got a good job. But stop and frisk. They grabbed this kid up, and he's got an an ounce of marijuana on him. Well, he's being arrested. He's going to jail. His parents don't have the money for a good lawyer. The lawyer that he ends up with, if it's not a public defender, and trust me, you never want a public defender, because all they want to do is clear cases. His public defender cuts a deal with the DA so that they don't have to do anything as far as court time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The DA gets his conviction, and that kid's going to get time. That kid's not getting probation. That kid's getting jail time. And the judge is not going to be concerned about that kid having his life ruined by a marijuana conviction. So there's your difference. There's your difference.
Drug traffic and the violence that comes along with that has put American police agencies and law-abiding citizens in a dangerous place.
Bill, where are the drugs coming from? I mean, you don't see any giant trafficking of drugs by black people. The drugs are coming into this country how? They're coming into this country because the majority is allowing it. The majority, i.e., I mean white people who are making their money off of the drug trade and then allowing it to flow into the minority neighborhoods. But guess what? Now the drug trade is going up into the socio-economic middle class neighborhoods, not in your traditional middle inner cities, but it's going up into New Hampshire and Vermont, where they have major drug issues. It's going out into the well-to-do neighborhoods in New Jersey. They have a major drug problem there. It's going into Kansas and Iowa, where they're proclaiming a drug epidemic. So now what's the excuse? Those people aren't being arrested, by the way. Those people are being called victims. They want to institute drug plans in order for people to get help. But you turn that around and look at the minority neighborhoods, the black neighborhoods, and no, there's no thought of them being anything but criminals that deserve jail time. So no, Bill, what you're saying isn't making sense, because drug trafficking is going everywhere in this country. It's in every state, and it's in every socio-economic group, and it's just a question of which group do the police target. And based on just what you said, we know which group they're targeting.
It's no surprise that black and Hispanic drug traffickers are arrested and incarcerated.
But it's no surprise that the white drug traffickers aren't being arrested and incarcerated, because they have the ability to hide and to pay off the people that they need to pay off, so they have no worries.
Surprise. Their numbers are greater proportionally than white drug traffickers.
That is such bullshit.
Now back to the protests. The key group driving violence on the streets is Black Lives Matter. After 5 police officers were killed in Dallas, a Black Lives Matter organizer, Sir Major, said this according to the Associated Press, quote, "Black Lives Matter doesn't condone shooting law enforcement, but I have to be honest. I understand why it was done. I don't understand. Now that's a provocative statement in the extreme.
What's provocative about understanding how somebody seeing black men being killed by police and finally snapping? And again, the gentleman that he referenced said the same. He said he didn't condone it. He doesn't support it. He wouldn't do it, but he understands that when you've had enough, you've had enough. Unfortunately, Bill, you don't understand that, and that's part of the problem. Yeah, you want to call this guy a terrorist because he killed 5 cops, wounded 7 other cops, and 2 civilians. That may in fact be true. Without a doubt, in my mind, and definitely not in yours, the guy had some issues, mental issues, not being the least. Because to go out to kill people is not normal. It's not normal. But in your mind, a black person going out and killing people is normal. Okay, Bill. That's your opinion, so be it.
Understanding terrorism, which is what happened in Dallas, terrorism, not difficult. You get an evil human being who kills people, a 5-year-old can understand that. Major says he doesn't condone it, so what's the point of understanding it?
The point of understanding it, Bill, is to look at the cause and trying to make changes so that the cause is not there and therefore the act becomes unnecessary. And that's your problem. You're basically pulling from your own soul your racism and projecting it out to your audience. If you understand something and see the wrongness and the roots and the cause and believe that the roots and the cause are unjust, you would tend to want to do something about it. But if you don't want to understand something, you just reactively lash out against whatever it is that you don't agree with, the problem will never be fixed. So that's your main problem, Bill. You do not want to try to understand, put yourself in another person's shoes, see another viewpoint that does not agree with your own.
Again, a ridiculous, irresponsible statement. But we have come to expect that kind of thing from Black Lives Matter, which chanted about police here in New York City, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon.
Now, Bill, at least get it right, Bill. The chant was in New York City, and if it was, that's not where it came from. The chant came from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where Black Lives Matter protesters were marching along with police, and the police were making the same chant. Why? Because it was a joke, Bill, but your snap crew of people that investigate these things never came across it, and the chant fit your narrative against the Black Lives Matter movement. Just like a lot of other things that you and the people at Fox do. You'll take snippets without really expanding upon the complete issue that you want to discuss.
Unfortunately, President Obama does not seem to understand the vitriol.
In a movement like Black Lives Matter, there's always going to be some folks who say things that are stupid or imprudent or overgeneralized or are harsh. And I don't think that you can hold well-meaning activists who are doing the right thing and peacefully protesting responsible for everything that is uttered at a protest.
President Obama got it right. You cannot hold every group responsible for everything that every member does. That's impossible.
With all due respect to President Obama, well-meaning activists do not associate themselves with a group that often commits violent acts and encourages violence through irresponsible rhetoric. Dr. King would not participate in a Black Lives Matter protest.
Bullshit. Dr. King would have probably been in the front of the Black Lives Matter protests because the Black Lives Matter movement does not advocate violence.
Of course, the liberal American media are largely sympathetic to the street demonstrations, even if they do turn violent. How many more times are we going to have to see Black Lives Matter protesters destroy stuff? How many more times? Yet if you criticize the group, you're branded a bigot by some far-left media precincts.
No, Bill. See, and that's the difference. You want to tie everything together. You can support the group, support the message, but condemn any type of damage or destruction that occurs. You can separate the two, but in your mind, you can't. It's all in, all the way on for everything that's done. Wrong.
Do you know that shortly after the Dallas police were murdered, a cop in Missouri was shot and critically wounded by a black man? The St. Louis County Police Chief says it was an assassination attempt. The accused shooter, 31-year-old Antonio Taylor, has a long rap sheet. He's a thug.
Yeah, but what I wanted to hear was that he was yelling he did it because of Black Lives Matter. Sorry about that. It's my phone going off. No, and it's just like that other bullshit story you had about the police officer that was killed by the black man down in Houston. You guys tried to tie that guy to the Black Lives Matter movement to the point that you even had the police chief down in the Houston area come on, and he specifically said that the guy has not made any claim of doing what he did because of the Black Lives Matter movement. It was later found that that gentleman had severe mental issues. But every time a police officer is shot or assaulted, you guys instantaneously want to attribute that crime to associations with the Black Lives Matter movement. The funny thing about it was, within the past, I believe, 48 hours, 2 bailiffs were killed and 1 police officer was injured. I believe it was in Missouri or Minnesota. I forget which one it was. But the initial story that came out was that it was a black guy that did it. And that story was flying all over mainstream media. When they finally got the story correct and found out that it was a white guy, nothing further has been said. I wonder why. Now, again, nobody is condoning violence, whether it was, as you can see, a police officer being hit in the head by a concrete brick, or anything else. Violence, obviously is not the answer, and no one is condoning violence. But for you to make it seem like this is the norm for the Black Lives Matter movement is total bullshit.
In Minnesota, another police officer hit in the head by a concrete brick. thrown by a protester on Saturday night. You guessed it. The demonstration was organized by Black Lives Matter. So again, Mr. President, you might want to back away from protesters who believe violence is acceptable.
And I agree with that, except that the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't believe that violence is acceptable. So, Mr. President, you have Bill O'Reilly's permission to fully embrace them.
Summing up, you want to protest? Good. Make sure you have your facts straight and don't hurt anybody or destroy anything. And that's a memo.
Yeah, and Bill, when you're going to do a story, you need to make your facts, get your facts straight, and don't display the venom against a group that has accomplished a lot of good that you unfortunately can't control. Let me close with this. Back in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King was labeled a communist. Okay? He was hated, arrested, pretty much everything you can think of. Okay? That was back in the 60s. 50 years later, oh, white people love rolling Martin Luther King out of their mouths. Martin Luther King this, Martin Luther King that. But that's not what went down in the 60s. They hated that man. Guys like Bill O'Reilly would have been right out in front, you know, calling him everything but a child of God. So I don't want to hear any of your bullshit as far as the Black Lives Matter movement is concerned, because you don't really know what you're talking about, and your biased point of view basically just exposes you for what you are. And in my opinion, I believe that you are a racist, and I'm not going to back away from that. In closing, if Mr. O'Reilly is so sure of his position, he needs to accept the various challenges to debate the Black Lives Matter movement with people who are well versed in the movement themselves and who have vast public speaking experience. I'd love to see him accept the challenge that was given on multiple occasions by Roland Martin. Roland Martin has even indicated that he would come on to his show and that they could designate 1 hour in order to debate the issues. Now, the thing about Roland Martin is Bill O'Reilly's not going to be able to overtalk him. And Mr. O'Reilly full well knows that. So he will never accept that challenge. So, Mr. O'Reilly, keep sprouting your bullshit rhetoric. Keep attacking Black Lives Matter. All that tells me is that you guys cannot control Black Lives Matter, and that Black Lives Matter is having a powerful effect on America today.